theme of this video is Elvis as a tragic hero. When I was in school, they defined a tragic hero, a man of noble character whose actions produce the opposite of his intentions. Elvis really does embody the whole idea of the American dream, the idea of the meritocracy. His father got arrested for writing a bad check. His mother was a cleaning lady and a seamstress, and he came from grinding poverty. And he went on to become arguably the most beloved entertainer of modern times. He literally went from rags to riches, and he accomplished it entirely through talent. All the traits of success that are the ideal of what the American self-made man. Elvis kind of embodies the American self-made man. He really does. His hairstyle, his attitude, his clothes, his sideburns, his androgyny, his moves, his singing style. None of this was concocted by Hollywood. None of it was following a trend. Nobody had ever done anything like this before. He was just a genius, and he did it when he was 19, 20 years old. I didn't know how to wipe my ass when I was 20 years old. And this guy was already Elvis at 20 years old. And there were many potential points of failure in his career in which he could have gone to a certain point and not made it any further. When he got signed to RCA for the highest fee that had ever been paid to a new artist, which was like $35,000, $40,000, he had to deliver for RCA. He'd been making hits for Sun Records. He'd been billed as this guy who could make a lot of hits, and RCA wanted him to make a hit, and they gave him Chet Atkins as his producer and flew him out to New York. And he had to make a hit record, and he did Heartbreak Hotel, and the studio brass, when they first heard Heartbreak Hotel, they didn't like it. They thought it was a song about a guy about to commit suicide. They thought it was too much of a downer. And it didn't do very well at first. It was kind of sluggish on its way up the charts. What if he'd flopped on his first record? But fortunately, he had Colonel Parker, who, despite his flaws as a human being, he did predict the importance of television before a lot of other promoters. And he saw that it was a visual medium with the potential for a mass audience, and he knew that it was going to be the next big thing. And he got Elvis a spot on the Tommy Dorsey show, and he did well with that. And you got to remember, this was the beginning of live television. The production values weren't that great. It was all black and white. Everything was live. If you screwed up, it was live. So when Elvis got up in front of those cameras, he had to bring it on. He had to bring it across in something that was going to come across on a black and white TV, and he did it. We got on Steve Allen, Milton Berle, and he dealt with some adversity on those shows. He got through Ed Sullivan, and he could have choked on any of these gigs. If one of them had not gone well, that could have derailed everything. But it was largely on the strength of those early television appearances that the Heartbreak Hotel went on to become the big hit that it did. If it hadn't been for TV, it might have just languished. So there's that. It took big balls to do what he did. He had to produce an aura of self-confidence and ease, and you lose sight of this because he comes off as such a humble, self-effacing, humorous, genuinely nice guy. But beneath the yes sir and the yes ma'am and all that, he was a tiger. He could bring it when it came to performing. It takes a lot of belief. It almost reminds me of Muhammad Ali. You have to be able to hypnotize yourself into having that much belief to be able to bring it off with such conviction. It took big balls. And he also had endurance. Elvis made it through 3 decades. He made it to the 50s, the 60s, most of the 70s. That's a long time to be a superstar at the highest level like he was. And he could absorb punishment. Nobody works like that anymore. The way Elvis worked in the 70s, they killed him. He was on the road 160 dates a year, twice a day. It was grueling. Movies were very stressful for him. He did 30 pictures over 9 years, and he starred in every one of those things. And when you're the star of the movie, man, you're under a lot of pressure. He could have choked at his first Vegas gig. Talking about some pressure. He was playing for a lot of money. The Colonel negotiated this big contract, and a lot of the brass were paying for it. They weren't sure if Elvis was going to be able to cut it. They thought of him as an old 50s guy Had been a movie star for a while, and was he going to be able to compete in this world of modern rock? Elvis started touring in about 1970 when he did his first road shows. You have to remember how early this was in the history of rock touring. At that time, the only big acts like selling out hockey stadiums were people like Jimi Hendrix. There was only a handful of people who were able to do that. And Elvis had a friendly rivalry with Led Zeppelin. He used to go out and look up into the audience and he'd say, I might not be Led Zeppelin, but I can still pack them in. But anyway, my point is, on his way to becoming a legend, Elvis had to pass many tests. He was at the peak of his fame, and the Army drafted him, and he went in the Army for 2 years, and he didn't know what was going to happen. And he lost his mother. Then he got involved in Hollywood. The colonel got him roped into all these movie contracts because he had to keep the money going, because by that time, his whole family was being supported by him. He had like 30 people that were dependent on him. He became the money machine in this system. The colonel was making all his money off of him. He wanted to keep him going. And then there was the drug addiction. He went through all the stages, but he basically handled his drugs. Even at the end, even when he was all fat and fucked up, he could still bring it. He could still sing. Sometimes he might have been stumbling around and forgetting the words, but there were times when he would dig deep and pull it out, like you see at the end of the Elvis movie. And he died in the harness, you know. He didn't quit and end up laying around his house like Brian Wilson. He stayed on the road and died on the way to another tour.